Luke 23:34. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. February 6, 1998, I was born on the only Friday night of the season the IMS boys basketball team didn't have a game at around 7 p.m. As my dad likes to say, I was a game time baby. I've grown up attending First Mennonite Church of Iowa City. I attended Cricket Creek Christian Camp in the summers. I participated in the First Mennonite Church Junior Mennonite Youth Fellowship, or just Junior MYF for short, before moving on to the high school MYF. Being a part of the MYF allowed me to participate in a service project at Drift Creek Camp in Oregon and attend conventions in Phoenix and Kansas City. During these times, I began to recognize other people's faith. Their faith was evident in their abilities to talk openly and easily about God, or how they opened their arms as they sang in worship. It's these experiences that have helped me recognize and develop my own faith. As I've gotten older, it's become a lot easier to apply faith to any situation or in any setting, including on the basketball court. In 1981, the NBA basketball team, the Detroit Pistons, drafted Isaiah Thomas. In 1982, the Pistons acquired Bill Laimbeer and Vinnie Johnson through trades. This marked the start of a new Detroit Pistons era, one that earned a label as the Bad Boys era. The new Pistons team renewed interest in Detroit as Piston fans began to love them. Meantime, the rest of the country began to despise them. They were physical and, from most perspectives, dirty. Along with their dirty play, another strategy they used was taking opponents out of the game mentally. They got in the faces of opponents and in their ears as they would talk trash. These tactics helped them win back-to-back NBA championships in 1989 and 1990. Tactics also helped them become recognized as one of the most classless acts in NBA history, which makes me wonder how an opposing player would feel if asked to forgive them. Throw back a couple thousand years and we have Jesus, the victim of pointless harassment. Neither Herod nor Pilate found a reason for Jesus to be killed, but in the end, Pilate caved to the demands of the crowd which shouted for Jesus' crucifixion. During the last moments of Jesus' life, as he hung with his hands and his feet nailed into a cross, he said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Jesus, in all his pain and facing his death, was able to forgive the people who were responsible for it. He was able to ask forgiveness for his culprits, the people who demanded his crucifixion and lay a crown of thorns on the top of his head and then proceeded to mock him. February 12, 2016, myself and the rest of the IMS boys basketball team traveled to Keosauqua to play against Van Buren in a conference shootout. We went into the game expecting physicality, but were unprepared for the dirty play that met us come game time. Early in the first quarter, I made a cut to the hoop where I was met by a shove which countered my momentum, taking my feet out from underneath me, resulting in me landing hard on the floor. I quickly learned the floor and I would become buddies, as this became a regular experience. Later in the game, coming off a screen, my neck was met by the extended arm of an opposing player, again causing me to hit the ground. Towards the end of the game, after I committed a foul in the open court, the player whose arm had met my neck asked me, "That was pretty cheap, don't you think? How would you like it if we did that to you?" Instead of pointing out all the times I've been blatantly shoved or fouled, I let out a little laugh and apologized once again. A couple weeks ago, I found out I would be playing in an all-star game with the same player, and my reaction was, why him? Afraid of another goofy encounter. But throughout the process of preparing for the service, I realized I had to forgive him if I didn't want that goofy encounter. Unfortunately, there was no miracle ending. I didn't give him an assist for the game-winning three or a perfect pass for a nice alley-oop, but I was able to treat him as a teammate, and he was able to do the same, which was more than I could have asked for 6 weeks ago. The smiling player I saw at the All-Star game was different than the ultra-competitive bully of a player I'd experienced earlier. By the goodness of God, I was able to forgive him, and our team went on to win the game.
Luke 23:43. Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. I think that we all sometimes ask Jesus to do things for us that aren't necessarily for his glory. Just like the criminal that asked Jesus to save them all, we sometimes ask Jesus to perform miracles of our own. Having a twin brother and an older brother, it used to be hard to not compare myself to them. I found myself asking God, why can't I be as smart as Cole? Or why am I so uncertain of my future when Lucas seemed to have it figured out by my age? I know that people say he's got a plan for us all, and he knows our future. But I wasn't buying it. I was struggling to realize that God made me who I am for a reason, and he put me here for a purpose. I remember a time when Cole and I were around maybe 12 or 13. We were outside playing basketball, and I kept getting so frustrated because it was so unfair how much taller he was and is than me. It seemed like it was impossible to try to make a shot with him guarding me, because apparently it is so funny to swap my shot every time. Then he would get the ball, run over me, and make a layup. After this happened, for about the 5th time in a row, I got really mad at him. I threw the ball at him and stormed in the house and started complaining and asking my mom, why didn't God make me bigger? Why didn't God make me stronger? I swamped her with all these questions that came partly from frustration, but had a bit of honesty to them. My mom tried to explain to me that God has a reason for me and he has a plan for me, but I didn't want to hear it. Now I realize how right she was. It wasn't until this past summer that I really realized that God made me perfect just the way I am. I think that I started realizing that God was working in my life. I started to see the talents and gifts that God has given me, and I stopped caring so much about my brother's gifts or other people's talents that I don't have. I didn't care as much about earthly things, and I started to focus more on heavenly things that would please God. But before I fully understood that, I had to overcome a big temptation that Satan put in my life. Satan has tempted me with many things, but I think the temptation I found hardest to overcome was doubt. Satan put a lot of doubt in my life, and for some reason, it got to me. I think that I struggled with it most during my middle school years. I was surrounded day after day by people who didn't love Jesus, go to church, or even know who Jesus is. Most of my close friends weren't Christian. They caused and were a bad influence on me. These peers of mine rubbed off on me after a while. I started not enjoying going to church as much. I started questioning the Bible. I even denied believing in God at one point in middle school because I thought that's what I needed to do to be accepted by my friends. I think that I had my lowest of lows in 7th grade. I was heavily influenced by the people at my school that I saw every day, and I was filled with doubt. I was overwhelmed by the challenge that Satan laid in front of me, expecting me to fail. I kept going to church with my family, but I was just going through the motions. I was totally lost, and I needed to be found. Little did I know, God was still working in my life. He never gave up on me. He led me to an event that took place in Minneapolis, Minnesota, called Acquire the Fire. I was touched at this place, and my life had been changed forever. At Acquire the Fire, there was a moment when the band was playing a powerful song talking about igniting a fire in your heart. And it kept repeating that phrase over and over again. I just sat down in my seat and broke down. I prayed to God that he could save my life, forgive me, and keep me on the right path from now on. From then on, I was on a spiritual high. I was just like the 2 criminals on the cross. I didn't want to be like the criminal who mocked and denied Jesus. I loved him, and I started wanting to pay attention in church. I was excited to go to church, and I loved Jesus. At church, I started wanting to get involved in some way, so I started praying that God would open up an opportunity for me to somehow get involved with my church. By the time I was in 8th grade, I had been praying about getting involved for some time. One night, my parents got a call from Lori Miller. She asked if I would be willing to play the drums for her worship team that Sunday. I was terrified, but I somehow just knew that it was God telling me to do it. So I did, and I have been playing for my church ever since. It has been a blessing to my life to be able to lead other people in worship. After I started playing the drums more and more for my church, I began to understand what God was trying to do with me. I began to realize that God had a plan all along for me. I started to learn to trust in God. My favorite verse in the Bible is Proverbs 3:5. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will make your path straight. Ever since I started trusting in the Lord more and more, everything had been clicking. Ever since I started going to IMS and surrounding myself with people who love Jesus like I do, I have been growing in my faith. The journey hasn't been a fairy tale. It has had its ups and downs during high school, but walking my own journey and figuring it out while trusting God is a lot easier than trying to do life on your own. I have found that if you trust in the Lord, the words Jesus spoke to the forgiven criminal are the same words he says to us. Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise.
What can take a dying man, raise him up to life again? What can heal a wounded soul? What can make us white as snow? What can fill the emptiness? What can mend our brokenness? Brokenness. Mighty, awesome, wonderful is the Holy Cross, where the Lamb laid down his life to lift us from the fall. Mighty is the power of the cross. What restores our faith in God? What reveals the Father's love? What can lead the wayward home? What can melt the heart of stone? What can free the guilty ones? What can save and overcome? Overcome. Mighty, awesome, wonderful is the Holy Cross, where the Lamb laid down his life to lift us from the fall. Mighty is the power of the cross. It's a miracle to me. It's a miracle to me. It's still a mystery. It's still a mystery. It's a miracle to me. The power of God for those who believe. Mighty, awesome, wonderful is the Holy Cross, where the Lamb laid down his life to lift us from the fall. Mighty, awesome, wonderful is the Holy Cross, where the Lamb laid down his life to lift us from